Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Confessions. What you're about to hear isn't a story about love. It's about confusion, silence, and that one text that made me question everything. Sorry, that was the entire message. Sent at 2:43 a.m. on a Saturday. No punctuation, no explanation. Just 5 letters that hit harder than any fight we'd ever had. I remember sitting up in bed, staring at it. The room too quiet, my heart too loud. She wasn't supposed to text me at all. She told me her phone would be off the whole weekend. No distractions, she'd said. We all agreed. And yet, there it was. One word. One crack in a perfect lie. I didn't reply right away. I didn't even breathe right away. I just sat there and stared at the message like it might change into something else if I looked long enough. 2 minutes later, I wrote back. Are you okay? No reply. 10 minutes. 20. Nothing. I stared at the wall like an idiot until sunrise. The thing is, there wasn't even a reason to be suspicious. She said she was going to a wellness cabin with 2 of her coworkers, women I'd met, even had dinner with once. She made a big deal out of packing light, bringing books, herbal teas, even a lavender sleep mask she hadn't used in years. I offered to drive her. She insisted she'd rather have the quiet time alone. I believed her. But after that message, after that sorry, something shifted. And when I say shifted, I mean violently tilted, like I'd been standing on solid ground and suddenly realized it was just painted cardboard over a hole. The day after the message, I tried to call. Straight to voicemail. I tried her 2 friends. One didn't pick up, the other had a voicemail inbox that was full. I wasn't panicking. Not yet. But I wasn't breathing normally either. Then came the ping. An email. A security alert from a shared device, our tablet. It had auto-logged into her account and picked up a recent location history. Not near the wellness cabin, but downtown. Downtown. A boutique hotel in the middle of the city. She had parked there Friday night and stayed until late Sunday morning. Same location pinged, both nights. I remember my mouth going dry. My body doing this weird, full-body chill, like I'd just stepped into the snow barefoot. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I tried to rationalize. Maybe her friend got sick and they had to go back. Maybe the cabin was closed due to weather. Maybe the wellness center got relocated. But then I saw the receipt. Yes, a receipt. The tablet also auto-synced her inbox. 2 cocktails. 1 king room. 2 guests. The name, Zach S. Who the hell is Zach S? At that point, my hands were trembling. I wasn't angry. I wasn't crying. I just felt small, shrinking, like a balloon deflating in a dark room no one visits anymore. And I still told myself, maybe this is a mistake. Maybe this isn't what it looks like. That Sunday evening, she walked back into our house like nothing happened. Hair still damp from a shower, dressed in the same leggings she wore when she left, face glowing like she really had spent a weekend meditating in the woods. She kissed me, told me she felt lighter, said she missed me. I asked her how the cabin was. She said magical. And then I asked her where it was. She hesitated. She blinked 3 times. Then she smiled. Not the kind of smile you give someone you love. The kind you give when you're playing poker with a bad hand and hoping no one notices. And she said, "Why are you asking like that?" I didn't answer her question. I couldn't. My mouth opened, but the words didn't come. "Why are you asking like that?" That's what she said. As if I'd accused her of something, when all I did was ask where the cabin was. And her eyes were searching mine in that way that made me feel like I was the one on trial, not her. So I shrugged it off. I muttered something about how I just couldn't find it online. She laughed, too quickly, and said it was super secluded, off the grid, that I wouldn't find it on Google. And then she went straight to the bathroom, locked the door. The shower turned on immediately. But I swear to you, I swear, she didn't take off her clothes until a full minute later. I know because I stood outside the door, listening, heart pounding like I'd swallowed a drum. I know how insane that sounds. I'm not proud of that. But something in me was unraveling, and I couldn't figure out what was real anymore. That night, I pretended everything was normal. We ate pasta and watched reruns of a sitcom we both liked. She leaned her head on my shoulder like she always used to, and part of me, some pathetic part, wanted to believe maybe I was just overthinking. That maybe Zach S. was a coincidence. Maybe she booked the hotel by accident. Maybe the wellness retreat got canceled last minute, and she didn't want to explain because it would have ruined my weekend too. But when she fell asleep, I grabbed her phone. I know how that makes me sound. But I waited until I heard her breathing slow into that gentle, rhythmic pace she always falls into when she's truly out. I took the phone from the charger, tiptoed into the hallway, and opened it with her fingerprint. She once used my thumb while I was sleeping to prank me, so I figured it was fair game. There were no texts, no photos, no emails, nothing suspicious. In fact, there was barely anything at all. She had deleted everything. Everything. The entire message history was spotless. Even our conversations were gone. Who deletes texts with their spouse? And before you ask, yes, she uses iCloud backups. But the most recent one had been turned off 3 days prior. 3 days before the trip. So I checked her notes app. I don't even know why. Maybe I was looking for clues or journal entries or something. What I found was a single note. No title, just a few lines, written like she was trying to remember something quickly. Hotel room was cold. Bring cardigan next time. Zach has a scar on his chest. Don't stare. Sunrise from room 604 was insane. I stood there in the hallway, my face burning. Every part of me was screaming, but no sound came out. I just read those lines over and over again, trying to convince myself I was dreaming. And then, because my masochistic brain decided that pain wasn't enough, I went to the Photos app. Recently deleted. There were 5 pictures, all blurred. Quick swipes or unintentional snaps. But one of them showed the edge of a hotel bed. Cream-colored blanket. A man's hand resting on the pillow beside a takeout box. It wasn't mine. And the worst part? The timestamp. It was taken Saturday night. At 11:12 p.m. When she texted me that single word, sorry. I sat on the hallway floor until morning. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just sat there like some broken lawn ornament, trying to understand how I could have missed every sign. How someone who once asked me to hold her during thunderstorms could so casually erase me from an entire weekend of her life. When she woke up, she walked right past me, kissed my forehead, asked if I wanted pancakes. I nodded. Because what else do you do when your wife makes you breakfast the morning after finding out she might have spent her retreat wrapped up in someone else's cardigan? I didn't eat the pancakes. I watched her flip them on the skillet, humming some tune she probably picked up in the car on the way back from her retreat. She smiled like nothing happened, poured syrup like it was just another lazy Sunday. I felt like a ghost in my own kitchen, just floating there with questions she'd never answer unless I dragged them out of her one by one. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I told her I needed a break. Just a day or two to clear my head. Maybe take the dogs out to my brother's cabin upstate. She nodded, almost too quickly, like she'd been waiting for that exact sentence. Said something like, you totally should. A change of scenery will help. Then kissed my cheek like she was proud of me for being emotionally mature. But I wasn't doing this to reset. I wasn't going to breathe mountain air and forget the note about Zach's scar or the hotel room sunrise. I was going to find out what she was hiding and how deep it went. I left that afternoon, told her I'd be back in 2 days. But instead of heading north to the cabin, I drove straight into the city. I didn't even have a plan. I just kept thinking about that name, Zach S., and the hotel name from her email. I parked 3 blocks away from the place and just sat there in the car for a while, watching the revolving glass doors, wondering if it was stupid to hope I'd see them together again, catch something that could confirm what I already knew but couldn't say out loud. I got out and went inside. Told the front desk I'd like to make a reservation for next month and asked if I could see one of the standard rooms before booking. The woman at the desk was young, bored, didn't care. She handed me a key card to peek at room 604. When I walked in, it was like walking into her memory. Everything from that note was real. The cream-colored comforter, the wide balcony with the view of the skyline. Even the thermostat on the wall read 63 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to need a cardigan. I stood in the middle of the room, heart pounding, taking in the silence. And then I looked down at the carpet, near the bed. There, faint but unmistakable, were the remains of something small and shiny, glitter. Blue specks. My wife doesn't wear glitter. But I'd seen that shade before, on the handle of her old makeup pouch she used to throw in her purse during nights out. The one she said she hadn't touched in over a year. That was the moment I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I drove home in silence. No music, no radio, just the steady hum of tires and the sound of betrayal bouncing around my skull. And when I walked through the door, Fiona was in the living room, barefoot, curled up under a blanket. reading a book like it was the most peaceful evening in the world. She looked up. "Hey," she said softly, like I'd just returned from the grocery store. "You're back early." And I just stared at her. I felt like I was seeing her for the first time, but not in the romantic way. It was like I was looking at someone else wearing her face. Someone who didn't flinch when they lied. Someone who planned and packed and smiled through it all like nothing mattered. I didn't ask her about Zach. I didn't bring up the note or the hotel or the scar. I just said, "Were you ever going to tell me?" She froze, blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Then, slowly, she put the book down, sat up straighter, and asked, "Tell you what?" I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the gaslighting was so predictable it felt scripted. Tell me what? Like I hadn't just seen the receipts, the room, the damn glitter on the carpet. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just asked her again, "Who is Zach?" Her face changed. Not panic. Not guilt. Something else. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, without a hint of shame, "He's no one." And that's when I realized this wasn't a moment of regret or fear for her. It was calculation. She'd already rehearsed this scene in her head. She wasn't shocked. She was just choosing which version of the lie she wanted to feed me. And I was starving for the truth. I should have walked out right then. Honestly, I should have grabbed my keys, packed a bag, and left her sitting there with her crossed arms and smug, passive face. But I didn't. I just stood there like an idiot, like some forgotten prop in a scene she'd rewritten without me. He's no one. Those words hung in the air like smoke from a fire she pretended never happened. And the worst part? She said it like she believed it. Like I was being dramatic for asking. Like I was making mountains out of little blue glitter dust and hotel timestamps. "Okay," I said. "Just that. Nothing else." I walked past her, went into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water I didn't need, and tried not to hurl it at the wall. I needed time to think, to get ahead of her next move. Because she wasn't going to confess. Not unless I forced her. Not unless I left her no room to squirm out with half-truths and manipulated timelines. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I reached out to someone I never wanted to speak to again, my ex, Julia. Now, before you think I went looking for comfort or revenge or anything reckless, I didn't. Julia and I split 3 years before Fiona and I met. But she's always been painfully good at reading people, especially women. And when I told her over text, "I think Fiona cheated, but she won't admit it," Julia called me within seconds. Her voice was sharp, fast, like she'd been waiting to be right about Fiona since day one. I laid it all out. The deleted texts. The strange note. Zach. The hotel room. The glitter. All of it. She listened quietly, didn't interrupt. And when I finally stopped talking, she said something that hit harder than I expected. If she planned it, she already made peace with it. "You're looking for guilt where there's strategy." Strategy. That's what this was. Not a mistake. Not some emotional lapse or accidental reconnection with an ex. This was something she architected. A weekend constructed like a project brief, planned, booked, erased. And I wasn't just on the outside of it. I was the loose thread she forgot to snip. Julia suggested I dig deeper. Not into Fiona, but into Zach. "Find out who he is," she said. "Because if she's this good at lying to you, he's either helping or clueless." So I did something I never thought I'd do. I used my design clients to get information. One of them, Drew, works in cybersecurity. I called in a favor. Sent him the reservation email with Zach's name and asked if there was anything public tied to it. Socials, work profiles, even alumni pages. I expected nothing, but I got a lot. Zach S., full name Zachary Shaw. Lives 2 towns over. Works in real estate. Divorced. No kids. And worst of all, he and Fiona had gone to college together. Same year, same major, even part of the same student marketing group. There were pictures on an old Facebook album, her at some house party, standing next to him with a red Solo cup in one hand and her arm around his waist. Not shoulder. Waist. That was the first time I saw her smile that wide in any photo. And I realized she never once told me about him. Not during our late-night talks. Not during the "who was your first real love" conversations. Not even once when we were reminiscing about college days. It was like she'd scrubbed him from her history on purpose. Because she knew. She knew the moment I heard his name, everything would crack. I didn't even have time to process it before I made another mistake. I followed him. Not in a creepy way. At least I don't think so. I just drove by the address Drew found. It was a small condo complex, nothing flashy. A silver SUV out front with realtor branding on the back window. I waited across the street like a coward, heart pounding, hands sweaty on the steering wheel. After about 20 minutes, the door opened, and she walked out. Not Fiona, someone else. Blonde, maybe mid-30s, carrying a gym bag and a coffee in each hand. She kissed Zach on the cheek before getting into the SUV and driving off. So he wasn't single. Or maybe she was just a client. Or maybe she was a decoy. I didn't know. I was spinning. My mind went from suspicion to paranoia to confusion all within 5 seconds. But what stuck with me, what made me clench my fists until my knuckles turned white, was that Zach didn't look like someone caught in a fling. He looked calm, comfortable, the kind of calm you only carry when you're sure no one knows your secret. I drove home in a fog, headlights blurring as I thought about Fiona's blank face, her effortless lies, the gaps in her stories. Everything was connecting, and yet, I still didn't have the full truth. Just fragments. Just glitter and ghosts and people pretending. But I was done being quiet. I didn't knock. I didn't tiptoe. I walked straight through the front door and into our living room like a man who'd finally stepped out of a fog and realized the fire had started hours ago. Fiona was curled up on the couch again, laptop balanced on her knees, sipping tea like everything was normal. Her eyes flicked up when she saw me. I didn't speak. I just stared, long enough for her to close the laptop without hitting a single key, place the mug down slowly, and lean back with that damn expressionless face of hers. Something wrong? She asked, like I'd forgotten to buy milk or ran over the mailbox again like I did last winter. I didn't answer her question. I pulled my phone from my jacket, opened the album with the screenshots, Zach's LinkedIn, the hotel receipt, the photos of them in college, and placed it on the coffee table between us like I was serving her evidence in court. Her expression didn't shift, not even a flinch. She just stared at it for a few seconds, then looked back up at me with a quiet sigh, as if I'd ruined something serene. "So you've been digging," she said softly, her voice so calm it made my skin crawl. I figured it was only a matter of time. She didn't even deny it. Didn't lie. Didn't flinch. Just acknowledged it like she was confirming a weather report. I asked her why. It came out like a croak, like my throat was closing around the words. Why him? Why lie about it? Why erase everything? Why act like I wouldn't notice? She stood up slowly, walked to the window, and stood there with her back to me for a long time. Then she said, "Because I wanted something that wasn't tied to us. Something that was just mine." That sentence broke something in me I didn't even know was still intact. Just hers? What the hell did that even mean? She turned back to me, folding her arms like she was cold. "You don't see it, do you?" she said. "You've been fading. You come home, and you're not here. You're in your head, in your guilt. You apologize for things I never asked you to apologize for. You flinch when I laugh too loud. You're afraid of upsetting me. And I don't want to be worshipped, Curtis. I want to be wanted." I stood there, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth would crack. "So you slept with him because I was too nice to you?" She rolled her eyes, and for the first time in our marriage, I hated her. Not just what she'd done. I hated her. She paced slowly now, the words coming easier to her, like she'd practiced this speech. "I didn't sleep with him. Not in the way you think. We didn't plan some affair. It wasn't candlelight and music. It was," she trailed off, struggling, like she wanted me to fill in the blank for her. "It was a weekend. A familiar face. A feeling I hadn't felt in years. You think you want the truth, Curtis, but you only want the version that paints me as the villain and you as the poor, betrayed husband." "No," I whispered, voice shaking. "I want the version where my wife doesn't disappear for a weekend and come home smelling like a hotel room and someone else's cologne." That hit her. Barely. But I saw her jaw twitch. And then she said the worst thing yet. "I didn't cheat on you. But I did step away from you. And I'm not sorry for that." I actually laughed then. A short, bitter, broken sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. I looked around the room. Our wedding photo still on the mantle, the couch throw I picked out because she said my taste was cozy, the worn spot on the rug where our dog always naps, and I realized this house had become a museum of things we used to be. "You stepped away?" I asked. "That's what we're calling it now." She nodded once, slowly. "Yes." I told her I was leaving. She didn't ask me to stay. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just looked down at her hands and said, "If you go now, don't come back. Because if you walk out, I'm not going to chase you. And if you want to fight, Curtis, you'll be fighting alone. I didn't answer. I walked upstairs, packed a bag, grabbed my toothbrush, charger, and one change of clothes. I stood there in the doorway to our bedroom, trying to remember what it felt like to walk in here and feel like I belonged. I couldn't. When I came back down, she was gone from the couch. The tea was still warm, the laptop still closed, and the silence was louder than ever. I checked into a small motel 30 minutes outside town. Nothing fancy, just a place with peeling wallpaper, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a bed that creaked every time I shifted my weight. But it was quiet, anonymous, and cheap. That's what I needed. A place where no one knew my name, where I didn't have to pretend I was okay. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the faded carpet for what felt like an hour, replaying every moment of that conversation. Her voice calm, mine cracking, her explanations sounding like poetry composed in advance. I stepped away from you. The sentence looped in my head like an off-key song. What kind of person rationalizes emotional betrayal as personal space? I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body was too locked up to produce anything but tremors. My stomach felt like it was being wrung out, and every few minutes I'd find myself pacing between the bed and the door like a man preparing for a battle he already lost. Eventually, I collapsed onto the mattress, still fully dressed, and let my mind spin itself into exhaustion. Sometime around 3 a.m., I passed out. I woke up to a text from an unknown number. I don't know what she told you, but you need to hear the other side before you disappear. No name, no context, just that. I stared at it for a long time, unsure if it was real or some fever dream from the edge of a breakdown. My hands were trembling as I typed back. Who is this? The reply came 30 seconds later. Zach. It felt like someone kicked me in the chest. I sat up so fast the blood rushed out of my head. I read the name again and again, just to make sure it wasn't a hallucination. Zach. Him. The man I tracked. The man from the photos. The one she swore meant nothing. I asked him how he got my number. He said Fiona had left her laptop open during a meeting a few days ago. Claimed he saw my contact on an old email thread they'd used to coordinate some dinner years ago. I didn't even remember it, but I didn't care. I wanted answers, and I didn't care where they came from. I agreed to meet him. We sat at a booth in a cheap diner off the highway that smelled like burnt toast and old coffee. He looked exactly like his photos, clean-cut, mid-30s, too confident. I hated him on sight. But when he sat down, he didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He looked tired, genuinely tired. The first thing he said was, "This wasn't supposed to happen." I didn't say anything. I wanted him to spill. Zach told me they'd reconnected 6 months ago. Fiona had reached out to him, not the other way around. She'd seen his name pop up on LinkedIn, apparently, and started a casual message thread. Friendly at first, then more frequent, then late-night messages, then emotional confessions. Things she didn't tell me. He claimed he pushed back, said he asked her if I knew, said he reminded her she was married. She told him it was complicated, that I'd changed, that our relationship felt safe but numb. I wanted to punch him in the mouth when he said that, but I didn't. I clenched my fists under the table and waited. Then he told me something that flipped everything. She didn't come to the hotel for me, he said quietly. She booked that room for herself. I didn't even know she was staying overnight until she called me crying that Friday night. Said she couldn't go home, that she felt like a stranger in her own life. According to Zach, she'd invited him Saturday afternoon. Not for romance, not for sex, but to see what it would feel like. He said she didn't kiss him, didn't touch him. She talked, for hours, about me, about who she used to be, about how she didn't recognize herself anymore. He told me she cried. I didn't believe him, but he didn't press. He just leaned forward and said something that cracked through the wall of rage in me. She didn't cheat on you the way you think, but you should ask yourself why she didn't want to come home. That sentence broke me more than if he'd told me they'd slept together. Because it wasn't just about physical betrayal. It was about something deeper. Something that had been growing in silence, while I walked around thinking everything was fine. While I apologized for every awkward silence and bent over backwards to be the nice guy. She had quietly started mourning the version of herself that existed before me. Or maybe because of me. I left the diner without saying much. Drove aimlessly. Ended up in a park I hadn't been to in years, just sitting on a bench and watching ducks float by like the world wasn't imploding. I thought about all the times I told her I loved her and got a quiet "I know" in return. About how she stopped laughing at my stupid jokes. How I kept lowering my voice so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed, kept backing off so she wouldn't feel suffocated. And how, in doing that, I disappeared without even realizing it. She didn't cheat on me in the way I'd imagined, but she still left me behind. And now, I didn't know what to do with the version of her I had left. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't go back to the diner. I didn't even check my phone for hours. I just drove until the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the road. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. My stomach was a tight knot of unanswered questions, and my thoughts were stuck in some sick loop that kept playing Zach's words over and over. She didn't cheat on you the way you think. I couldn't tell if that was meant to comfort me or devastate me further. Because here's the thing. The idea of her body with someone else. Yeah, that was brutal. But the idea of her soul wandering off without me, of her choosing silence over truth, of her letting me talk to her every day for months while her mind was somewhere else, that was worse. That was abandonment wearing the mask of routine. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was just past midnight. The house looked exactly the same, like nothing had happened. Porch light on, curtains drawn, the faint blue glow of the living room TV flickering through the blinds. But something felt different. Like walking into a house that had already been emptied emotionally. I stepped inside, and sure enough, she was there, curled up on the couch again, the same blanket, the same tea mug, like she'd been waiting. Not anxiously, just expecting. She didn't speak when she saw me. Didn't ask where I'd been or why I came back. She muted the TV and sat up. For the first time, she looked tired. Not in the way someone looks after a bad night's sleep, but the kind of tired that lives in your bones. That kind of tired that knows it's time to stop pretending. I sat in the chair across from her and asked the only question that mattered anymore. Why him? She looked at me for a long time before answering. Because he knew me before I forgot who I was. That silence after her answer was suffocating. I tried to breathe through it, but it felt like she'd just handed me a mirror I didn't want to look into. She continued, her voice flat but honest. I don't love him, Curtis. I don't want to be with him. But for 2 days, I remembered what it felt like to be someone who wasn't constantly walking on eggshells. Someone who wasn't pitted, or tiptoed around, or waited on. You've been disappearing from me one apology at a time. I was trying to be patient. But eventually, I stopped recognizing the version of you who always needed permission to feel anything. I didn't even know how to respond. Part of me wanted to shout, to tell her that I bent over backwards because she seemed fragile, because she pushed me away every time I showed emotion, because I was scared of being too much, too loud, too male. And part of me wanted to ask her why she never told me any of this before inviting a ghost from her past into our present. Instead, I asked, did you want me to find out? She looked away then, eyes fixed on some point in the dark hallway behind me. Part of me did, she whispered, because part of me hoped it would wake you up. I nearly choked on the bitterness rising in my throat. So you orchestrated a breakdown just to see if I'd fight for you? She shook her head. No, I didn't plan it like that. But once I realized what I'd done, I didn't delete the clues very well. Maybe some part of me. Yeah, maybe I wanted you to notice. Because if you didn't, if it didn't even shake you, that would have told me everything. I stood up then, pacing, furious, not just with her, but with myself. Because she was right about something. I had been disappearing. I had walked on eggshells for so long, I forgot how to take up space in my own marriage. I became the quiet comfort, the safe background, the man who asked permission to express himself. And Fiona, she didn't want a ghost. She wanted a flame. But instead of lighting one, she lit a match under our foundation. I stopped pacing, looked at her one last time. You could have just talked to me. Her smile was small, almost tragic. I tried. You were too busy trying not to hurt me. We sat in silence until the clock struck 2. Neither of us moved. She eventually fell asleep on the couch, still wrapped in the blanket she used to beg me to steal from the dryer because it smelled like me. I watched her breathe, chest rising and falling like the world hadn't split beneath our feet. And I realized then, we weren't in love anymore. We were just two people living inside the ruins of who we used to be, too tired to leave, too broken to rebuild. And in the quiet of that living room, I made a decision. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the kitchen, lights off, phone face down, listening to the steady hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. Fiona was still on the couch when the sun started to rise, blanket tangled around her, hair a mess, face peaceful in a way that made my chest ache. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't confused. I was just done with the silence. So when she stirred and opened her eyes, I spoke first. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. She blinked at me, trying to register whether this was a dream or some delayed confrontation. I walked over, sat on the far edge of the couch, and took a breath that felt like it had been waiting to happen for months. "I don't hate you," I repeated. "But we stopped loving each other the right way a long time ago. And I think we both knew that before Zach. Before that weekend. Before everything." She didn't argue, didn't try to twist it. She just looked at me with tears gathering in her eyes. And for once, there wasn't a wall between us. Just two people standing on the same crumbling bridge, finally looking down at the cracks. I told her I wanted us to separate. Not with lawyers or anger or scorched earth, but with honesty. With peace. I told her I wanted her to find whoever made her feel alive again. And I wanted to find myself again, too. Without guilt, without walking on eggshells, without pretending to be someone softer than I really was. She nodded. And then she cried. Not a performance, not a tactic. Just a real, human sob. I held her hand. We didn't kiss. We didn't make any dramatic promises. We just sat there in the middle of the wreckage and agreed, for the first time in years, on something that mattered. Over the next few weeks, we worked out the logistics. She moved into a new apartment downtown, close to her job. I stayed in the house with the dogs, turning the guest room into a studio space like I always said I would. We still talked, still checked in. There was no hatred, just distance. And strangely, that distance gave us room to breathe. And somewhere in all of it, I started feeling like a person again. I took myself on hikes, started sketching again, real sketching, not just work stuff. I reconnected with a few old friends, even had lunch with Julia, who joked that this time I actually listened. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent so long trying to be the version of myself that wouldn't break anything. I forgot that being real meant risking a little damage sometimes. As for Fiona, I heard through a mutual friend that she and Zach never became a thing. Apparently, whatever that weekend was, it was just a mirror, a glimpse. She told someone it helped her see herself clearly, but not because she wanted to go back. Because she finally knew what she didn't want anymore. And that made me smile. This story could have ended bitterly. And maybe it would have, if either of us had insisted on being right instead of being honest. But it didn't. It ended with two people who once loved each other, letting go with grace. And maybe that's not the dramatic ending some people expect. But it's real. It's peace. It's closure. And it's mine. Thanks for listening to my story here on Reddit Confessions. Have you ever been in a relationship where silence said more than words ever could? Or where walking away felt more honest than staying? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your story. And if you've made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Reddit Confessions for more stories just like this one. Raw, real, and sometimes redemptive.